Morning mist clings to the low hills near Chaeronea as shields knock together, and men shift their weight in the dirt, waiting for orders that will decide the fate of Greece. You can hear leather creak, spear shafts scrape stone, and somewhere, a horse snorts impatiently. If you were standing here caught between two advancing lines, you probably wouldn't survive. Not because of individual bravery or cowardice, but because this battlefield is about systems colliding, not heroes. In 338 BCE, Philip II of Macedon faces a coalition of Greek city-states led by Athens and Thebes. And the tension is not just political but tactical, a test of old warfare against something unsettlingly new. The Greek allies deploy in traditional, hoplite fashion, dense ranks of citizen soldiers with overlapping shields and spears leveled forward, a formation perfected over centuries of interpolis warfare. Opposite them, the Macedonian army looks familiar at a glance, infantry in close order, but its internal mechanics are radically different. This confrontation at Chaeronea is an officially recognized turning point in Greek military history, where battlefield function begins to matter more than civic identity. Modern historians still debate whether Philip intended a decisive clash here, or whether events forced his hand, but few dispute that this was a calculated test of his reformed army. What makes this moment dangerous is how each force understands combat. Greek hoplites rely on collective courage and cohesion, but their effectiveness depends on flat terrain and unified command. Macedonian soldiers, by contrast, are trained for prolonged maneuver, drilled to maintain formation under movement and stress. The strength of the Greeks lies in their shock power. Their weakness is rigidity. Macedonian flexibility promises control, but at the cost of complexity. If coordination fails, everything collapses. A lesser-known detail often overlooked is that many Macedonian infantrymen were veterans of campaigns in rough Balkan terrain, accustomed to imperfect ground, unlike many urban hoplites fighting outside their usual conditions. Academic debate continues over whether morale or mechanics mattered more in this opening phase, especially when comparing Chaeronea to earlier hoplite clashes like Mantinea. As the lines begin to move, it becomes clear this is not just another battle, it is a live experiment in how armies are meant to function. The Macedonian phalanx begins to advance, and at first glance it seems almost cautious, its pace measured, shields held close, spear points bristling like a moving thicket. This is not the old Greek hoplite phalanx, but Philip II's re-engineered version, officially tested in battle after years of refinement and smaller campaigns. At Chaeronea, its function is not simply to smash forward, but to control space, anchoring the battlefield while other elements prepare to move. The long sarissa pikes, some reaching 6 meters, extend far beyond the front rank, creating a lethal buffer zone that Greek spears cannot easily penetrate. To operate this formation in real combat requires intense discipline and specialized training. Each soldier must maintain exact spacing, balance the heavy pike with both hands, and trust his shield to hang from the shoulder rather than dominate his grip. Strength is essential, but endurance and spatial awareness matter more. One misstep can ripple through the ranks. The phalanx's greatest strength is frontal dominance. Few formations in the ancient world could approach it head-on without suffering disruption. Its weakness, however, lies on the flanks and in uneven terrain, where the long sarissas become liabilities. At Chaeronea, Philip exploits both strength and weakness deliberately. Ancient sources describe a controlled withdrawal by the Macedonian right, a maneuver still debated by modern scholars. Was it a feigned retreat, or a disciplined response to pressure? Academic debate hinges on whether such precision was possible under battlefield stress, especially when comparing Macedonian drill levels to earlier Greek armies. Either way, the phalanx functions here as a tool of manipulation rather than blunt force. A lesser-known side fact is that the rear ranks of the phalanx often served as moral stabilizers, pressing forward physically to prevent hesitation in front. An early form of enforced cohesion, compared to Persian infantry formations, which emphasized numbers over depth, or Roman maniples that would later favor flexibility. The Macedonian phalanx sits at an evolutionary midpoint. At Chaeronea, it proves that infantry can dominate not just by courage, but by engineered cooperation under pressure. As the infantry engagement draws the Greek line forward, movement stirs on the Macedonian left, where cavalry horses stamp and riders adjust their grips. This is where Chaeronea shifts from a contest of formations to a test of coordination. The Macedonian cavalry, officially commanded on one wing by the young Alexander, is not an afterthought, but an integrated striking arm designed to exploit openings created by the Phalanx. Unlike the lighter Greek horsemen, Macedonian companions fight as shock cavalry, armored, tightly grouped, and trained to charge in formation. Executing such a charge requires exceptional skill. Riders must control powerful horses at speed, maintain alignment with their comrades, and strike precisely where enemy cohesion is already strained. The strength of this cavalry lies in momentum and timing. Its weakness is exposure if isolated or forced to fight prolonged engagements. At Chaeronea, the cavalry does not charge blindly. Ancient accounts describe a moment when the Theban sacred band holds firm, suggesting that success was not inevitable. Modern historians argue over whether Alexander led the charge personally or symbolically, but the event itself, an infantry-pinned enemy struck decisively by cavalry, is undisputed. A lesser-known detail is that Macedonian cavalry training emphasized collective turning and regrouping, allowing riders to reform after impact rather than scatter. This sets them apart from many Greek cavalry forces, which often lack the discipline for sustained shock action. In academic comparisons, scholars frequently contrast Macedonian cavalry with Persian horse archers, noting that while Persians dominated at range, they struggled against cohesive infantry-cavalry coordination. The skills demanded of these riders go beyond bravery. Spatial awareness, responsiveness to signal, and trust in adjacent units are essential. If the Phalanx had failed to hold, the cavalry charge would have been suicidal. Conversely, without cavalry, the Phalanx's pressure might have remained inconclusive. Chaeronea demonstrates an officially recognized evolution in how cavalry functions not as harassment or pursuit, but as a decisive arm synchronized with infantry action. In that moment, as hooves thunder into the Greek line, the battle's outcome begins to tilt irreversibly. The Greek coalition meets this coordinated assault with methods rooted in an older military logic. Athenian and allied hoplites press forward in dense ranks, shields locked, believing reasonably that cohesion and courage can still decide the day. The Theban contingent, anchored by the sacred band, represents the most professional element of the Greek force. Veterans trained to fight shoulder to shoulder with absolute trust. At Chaeronea, their performance becomes an officially recognized case study in how elite troops can still fail when systems around them falter. Greek hoplite warfare functions best when lines remain straight and pressure remains mutual. Each soldier needs strength to carry heavy armor, endurance to maintain formation, and the psychological resilience to push against another mass of men. The formation's great strength is its stability. Its weakness is its limited adaptability. Once engaged, turning or responding to threats on the flank becomes extremely difficult. At Chaeronea, as parts of the Greek line advance too far in pursuit of Philip's apparent withdrawal, cohesion begins to fray. A lesser-known side fact is that command within the Greek coalition was divided, with rival city-states reluctant to yield tactical authority, a detail often overshadowed by the drama of the sacred band's stand. Academic debate continues over whether the Greeks misread Macedonian intentions or simply lacked the tools to respond. When compared to later Roman legionaries who could rotate units and respond to multiple threats, the hoplite system appears rigid, though still formidable in the right conditions. The soldiers themselves are not inferior. Their skills are simply mismatched to the situation. Hoplites are trained for frontal collision, not layered warfare. As cavalry pressure mounts and the Macedonian phalanx maintains contact, Greek units struggle to realign. Even elite formations cannot compensate for structural limitations. Chaeronea exposes this gap mercilessly, showing that bravery without flexibility can become a liability. The coalition does not collapse immediately, but the battle's logic has shifted, and the old rules no longer guarantee survival. What unfolds next at Chaeronea is not chaos, but orchestration, and this is where Philip II's design becomes unmistakable. Infantry pressure, controlled withdrawal, and cavalry assault are not separate acts, but parts of a single system unfolding in sequence. The Macedonian army functions like a set of interlocking gears. The Phalanx fixes the enemy in place, drawing attention and commitment, while the cavalry strikes where that commitment creates vulnerability. This deliberate synchronization is the officially recognized hallmark of the battle, and the reason Chaeronea is studied as more than a tactical victory. Command and communication are central to this moment, signals likely visual rather than shouted must pass through dust, noise, and confusion. Officers at multiple levels need the judgment to act without waiting for perfect clarity. The strength of this system is its adaptability. Its weakness is its reliance on disciplined execution. If timing slips by even minutes, cavalry can arrive too early and be repelled, or too late and find no opening. Modern academic debate focuses on how centralized Philip's control really was, with some arguing that subordinate initiative played a greater role than ancient sources admit. A lesser-known detail is that Macedonian units trained together year-round, unlike many Greek citizen militias that assembled only for campaigns. This continuity builds trust, allowing soldiers to accept temporary retreat or exposed flanks without panic. When compared to Persian combined arms attempts, which often relied on numerical advantage rather than integration, the Macedonian approach appears more precise and economical. The skills demanded of soldiers in this system are unusual for the ancient world. Infantrymen must resist the instinct to pursue. Cavalry riders must restrain speed until the exact moment. Officers must read terrain and enemy morale simultaneously. This combination outclasses rival armies not because each component is individually superior, but because they are mutually reinforcing. Chaeronea proves that battlefield effectiveness now depends on coordination across arms, not just excellence within one. At this point in the fight, the outcome is no longer in doubt. It has been engineered. When the fighting finally subsides at Chaeronea, the field tells a story that echoes far beyond Boeotia. The Greek coalition is broken, Thebes humbled, Athens spared but politically constrained, and Macedon emerges as the dominant power in Greece. This outcome is not merely diplomatic, it is an officially recognized military shockwave. Armies across the Greek world are forced to confront a hard truth. Traditional methods, even when executed bravely and competently, are no longer sufficient against a fully integrated force. In the immediate aftermath, Macedonian troops demonstrate another functional advantage: the ability to maintain order after victory. Discipline prevents reckless pursuit, preserving combat effectiveness and reinforcing command authority. This restraint highlights a lesser-discussed skill Macedonian soldiers were trained in: controlled aggression. Greek hoplites, by contrast, often relied on the natural end of resistance to conclude battles, a habit that could unravel formations if fighting resumed unexpectedly. Academic debate continues over whether Chaeronea represents a sudden military revolution or the culmination of gradual trends already underway. Some scholars argue that Philip merely refined existing ideas, while others compare the battle to later watershed moments, like Roman victories over Hellenistic armies. When contrasted with Sparta's decline or Persia's reliance on scale over integration, Chaeronea stands out as proof that organization now outweighs tradition. A lesser-known side fact is that Philip reportedly erected monuments honoring fallen Greeks, an act interpreted variously as political theater or genuine respect for defeated enemies. Either way, it underscores confidence rather than desperation. For soldiers, the lesson is clear: future survival depends on versatility. Infantry must cooperate with cavalry. Commanders must think in layers. Individual skill must serve collective timing. Chaeronea's legacy is not the end of Greek warfare, but its transformation. The battle demonstrates that effectiveness now lies in combining arms into a single operational language. Those who adapt will dominate. Those who cling to older forms will be preserved only in memory. As dust settles on the field, one era quietly closes, replaced not by chaos, but by a new, disciplined order of war. Chaeronea endures because it is not just a victory, but a demonstration. The Macedonian army succeeds not through numerical superiority or moral collapse of the enemy. But through a system designed to function under pressure, the Phalanx provides control, the cavalry delivers decision, and command binds them together into a coherent whole. In effectiveness terms, this integration dramatically reduces risk. Weaknesses in one arm are covered by strengths in another, compared to earlier Greek hoplite warfare. The Macedonian method increases battlefield adaptability and strategic reach. It also imposes higher training demands, meaning such an army is harder to replace but far more reliable once formed. When measured against Persian or later Roman systems, Macedon represents a critical evolutionary step rather than an endpoint. Its approach influences successors, even as its own limitations, especially the Phalanx's rigidity, eventually become apparent. Ultimately, Chaeronea proves that the future of warfare belongs to armies that think in combinations, not categories. The battle's effectiveness lies in how completely it rewrites assumptions about how soldiers fight, move, and trust one another. That lesson remains relevant wherever coordination decides survival.